Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill, the 28th Senatorial District Senator here in the state of Pennsylvania and locally, and she's with us on WSBA. Good morning, Kristin. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. Great to be with you this morning.
Always good to have you aboard. And I guess we've got, now it doesn't affect you totally, but we got a new Speaker of the House in the State House, Brian Cutler from right next door here in Lancaster County, right?
Indeed. I think he will be an exceptional speaker. He's certainly served with integrity and compassion throughout his tenure. I was very proud to have voted for him as the majority whip, as a House member, and I think he'll do an exceptional job. Of
course, taking over from Mike Turzai, who resigned last week, and Brian Cutler's kind of worked his way up the line pretty quickly, though, hasn't he? What is it about him that made him such an? Because it was kind of a hands down look. It made him a really great choice here for Speaker of the House.
Well, again, I said he has served with integrity. He's someone who you can trust.
Okay.
And in Harrisburg, a person of their words can go far.
We often, and it's funny you mention that because many people don't have that feeling, do they? I mean, I'm sure you talk to a lot of constituents and people say, and we'd like to know, we have that feeling about you or any other representative, but there are people who say, in a time of politics, you can't trust anything that a politician says. How do you react when you hear that kind of thing? What do you say to people? Because a lot of people think that honesty has become something that you can prey upon. Some of these politicians we watch nationally and even statewide sometimes, they prey upon those who would try to be honest and do their job in a forthright way with kind of the political pandering and dishonesty that we see out there.
Look, I think every person who goes into elected office needs to remember that at the end of the day, there's only going to be two things that you walk out of that state capitol with or the national capitol with, and that is your integrity, your reputation, and your family,
right.
and stay focused on that because you won't always be there. And so to maintain those two things is really, really important. And, I've often said I raised 3 children, and they're watching.
Yeah.
My children are watching me. Everyone's children are watching. And so you have to comport yourself accordingly.
That's a great way to say it. I've never heard it said quite that way, but I really think it's good. I remember being at a social function one time at the Valencia, and I had a representative come up, and he said to me, "Hey, you have a second?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, Harrisburg is a lot tougher and a lot worse than I thought it was. He said, "What do I do?" And he knew I'd been watching the paper, and he was kind of fighting his party and all this kind of stuff. And I said, "Come back with your honor." I mean, come back with your honor. I mean, the old Spartan thing, come back wearing your shield or on it. Come back with your honor. I mean, if you don't have your honor when you come back, and I often say to people, don't burn the bridge to caucusdom. When you cross over that bridge and your caucus says, now you got to do what we say to do, raise money, do all the things that you have to do for the caucus, and you forget about the constituents, and the constituents ultimately are the people that you're serving. And sometimes because of the pressures, I know I talked to a national congressman who went to Washington. He said, number one thing we're supposed to do is raise PAC money. Really? And he said, I wouldn't do that. So he said, I couldn't make it for a long period of time. But when you think about the things that your party asks you to do in the name of the caucus and the party and stuff, and at the end of the day, it's really not about your party. It's about the people that you're serving. And I think what you said is so important to kind of come back and check that mindfulness at the door, so to speak. Does that make any sense?
Oh, I completely agree with you. And at the end of the day, you're going to come back home and you're going to live in your community. You're going to go to church with people, meet people at the grocery store, at restaurants, at the dry cleaner, and they are always the most important people. And it's nice to say that you have friends in Harrisburg, but really the only friends that matter are the ones here at home.
Couldn't agree with you more. We're talking with Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill this morning, 28th Senatorial District. So I'm reading about, we now have 66 counties that have gone green. Lebanon County is the one county that is not green at this particular point, and yet we're going to see Friday Philadelphia, some other counties that don't seem to meet some of the criteria, and Lebanon apparently does not either. I think Lancaster, to some degree, has already been passed on, and they don't meet all the criteria. The idea? I think one of the things that has been really confusing has been what are the rules and the confusing part of those as we've gone through this whole process. Your thoughts on that, Kristin?
Well, I think that from the very, very beginning of this, Gary, there was not a lot of clarity. There was an awful lot of confusion, and that has plagued this governor's response from day one. And the issue of Lebanon County really begs the question, is this about science or is this about politics?
Yeah.
And you are absolutely right. What are the metrics? Be clear with people. And I wrote the governor a letter. It was very interesting, Gary. I've sent the governor several letters. I've never received a response to any of my letters.
Wow.
I didn't receive a letter from the governor until he sent a 2.5-page letter indicating why I should not vote to end his disaster declaration or his emergency declaration. So, what are the criteria? I think we're still trying to understand that. And I think people are reasonable. I think people want to do the right thing. I think that when confronted with great challenges, people rise up. But you have to tell them, what are the metrics you need to make? Now, we've got county commissioners in Philadelphia who've said they don't want to open into July, and the governor said, okay, I'll let those county commissioners make that decision. But when the county commissioners in Lebanon wanted to go down a different path, he said, no, you can't do that.
Well, and I was taken aback yesterday. Dr. Levine, I guess over the weekend, talked about a partisan vote there in Lebanon and got into the politics of it. And I felt, that's not really the job of the Department of Health to get into that. If the governor wants to get into that and play politics, that's fine. But let the political guy do that, not the people that we're counting on for health information. I didn't think that we needed to hear from Dr. Levine on that. I'm not sure that's her purview or her area of expertise. Your thoughts?
Again, it's not science, it's politics. And that's not the way to manage the Commonwealth during a pandemic. And we have seen this over and over again. For example, Hershey Park is opening.
Right.
Fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
The governor marched down the street of Harrisburg with people standing up for their rights under the Constitution.
Right.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
But the Carlisle Car Show can't open.
Right. Although they eventually pulled back from that.
Co-equal branches of government, thank goodness. A judge who was wise, asked the right questions, was able to hear that case, and they were able to resolve that, and the good people of Carlisle had their show.
Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill from the 28th Senatorial District with us here this morning on WSBA. Kristin, one of the things I remember when you and I first talked after the whole COVID pandemic thing got started, the very first thing you said, I'm tired of cleaning up after the governor's messes. Do you remember that statement? And you were pretty hot. I
certainly do.
Yeah, you were pretty hot. And you were talking a moment ago before we went to break about the idea that, we continue to kind of change things. And some would say, okay, well, this is a changing kind of environment because of COVID and so forth. So isn't that okay? How do you answer people when they throw that kind of back at you and say, all right, well, maybe you're cleaning up after his messes a bit, but, this is a difficult time and we need to give the governor some slack and we need to make sure that we change according to how this thing is changing. How do you answer people when you hear those kind of responses, which I'm sure you've heard?
Absolutely. But the problem is, Gary, that the governor has taken a go-it-alone approach that's not working. For example, our nursing homes. Our nursing homes have been ground zero during this pandemic. And just recently, what we learned that even though they've been devastated by this virus, they've had 2/3 of all deaths universal testing at these facilities is being delayed until July 24th.
Yeah.
Why? The Secretary of Health moved her mother out of a personal care facility at the outset of the pandemic and then mandated that these facilities continue to accept residents who tested positive for the virus. And now we're saying we're not going to get you testing until July 24th. And by the way, if you have a lot of people who've tested positive, we're now going to begin to fine you. You have put them in an untenable position, and you have not been able to move quickly enough to address the concerns. So, I get that things are changing. I get that things have to evolve. I understand that science, we can learn more through science.
Right.
But, when that is the biggest problem that we're facing, to deny them the testing until July 24th, I just don't understand. And it's gotten to the point where whether it's unemployment compensation, which Friday I left my district office at 5 o'clock and could not be more frustrated with the unemployment compensation system. Now we're being told that there's a problem with the vendor, that people who need the PUA aren't going to be able to get assistance for another 3 weeks. We still have 350,000 people who have not received access to unemployment compensation. And in my district alone, I had 118 cases that I had yet to close on Friday afternoon. Through the weekend, 118 people who don't have a paycheck and don't have unemployment compensation. So, in those places where the governor has needed to be responsive and move and change to help people, he's not been able to do it.
The whip hasn't been out, so to speak. Yeah.
And going it alone is not working.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we have seen, the unemployment checks not getting to people and us being overwhelmed. And, of course, the governor along the way saying, well, we've made some changes, we've got more people working. So it doesn't seem to have helped because a lot of people are still sitting there checkless so far during a very difficult time. And again, I'm sure where you come back to cleaning up the messes, you're not asked to help out with that. And yet you're asked to take care of the problems when people come to you. And it does seem like in a partnership, it might work a lot better to get the representatives and the state senators on your side to help with this and bounce ideas off on a better way that maybe to do this if they're also going to have to help to clean up the mess, which ultimately you're having to do.
Well, and Gary, you have to look back at the way our system of government was originally created by very intelligent individuals who had a tremendous amount of foresight. And they created a system of government that prevented any one branch from accumulating too much power, right?
Right.
And it was done intentionally because they innately understood that collaboration amongst the people and amongst the branches of government was the best way to govern and would create the best outcomes. And, it was designed so that no one person is above the law. And that's really what we have to get back to. We have to restore our system of checks and balances. We need to work together. And that is the only way we are going to responsibly, safely, and intelligently protect the lives of our in this Commonwealth. Well,
it's going to be really interesting to see how the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rules on the emergency powers, which obviously they're going to look at now, they've said. And I'm going to be anxious to see what they come out with as a verdict decision, rather. Let me ask you one final question. We're in green right now. What's next?
Right.
What's next? And is that being talked about in the halls of the State Assembly? About a minute left. Final thoughts.
It's being talked about in that I think many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are asking the question that you just asked, what is next? And we don't have that answer. Yeah. But I think when you talk to people here in York County, they will tell you that it's time. It's time that, again, we work together to responsibly, safely, and intelligently restore lives and livelihoods. It's time to get back to it.
Do we ever get back to normal where we're not wearing masks in places, where we're not worried about social distancing? Do you see that coming at any point in time?
I do.
Okay.
We're going to get there. We are absolutely going to get there.
Yeah, that's kind of what a lot of people are saying. Some people are already treating it that way. I think it's wise to be careful with some of this. But yeah, it's just it's going to be an interesting process, and we'll continue to talk with you along the way, Senator. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. It truly is a pleasure.